Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a divorce valuation expert and mediator in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, we'll discuss why valuation expert opinions differ and the value of a rebuttal expert with Matt Stelzman, an expert in forensic, litigation, and valuation work in Chattanooga, Tennessee, who also serves clients in Atlanta and around the country. If we start to look at business valuations and how we go about creating a valuation, there's a lot of standards that a valuation professional has to follow when developing their valuation. And these standards fall under each of their credentials. And if you have multiple credentials, you kind of have to look at all the standards. But if we understand that there are certain reporting standards for valuations in a litigation purpose, but they could be waived, and then we go to do litigation support services for like economic damages and lost profits, which is even less regulated. What are some of the issues you're seeing with professional work product? And why do you think there is such a difference between expert opinions in this situation?
Yeah, so I think you hit on something that's interesting with the standards. So like you said, under litigation, a lot of the standards in terms of reporting are waived, but the development standards are still there. So you're supposed to go through the same standards that you would typically use when doing evaluation for any purpose when you're deriving what the value is. So, the research and all that comes into play with under the standards of valuation for any purpose should be applied for litigation. However, when it comes to reporting, those are typically waived for valuation work that you're doing for litigation. But when it comes to litigation work in general, whether it's economic damages, lost profits, anything along those lines, in addition to the valuation for litigation purposes, I kind of like to think of it of how does this play out in a normal scenario. So when I get a call from an attorney, typically it goes something like, hey, we've got this case. I'm going to give you a brief overview, and they'll talk to you for a few minutes, and they'll say, hey, can you come in? We'd like to meet with you and go over a little bit more specific about the information that we have and, kind of what the case is about. And so you go down to the attorney's office and, the attorney's there, or attorneys, multiple attorneys, and maybe the client's there as well. And you go in and they kind of give you the lay of the land. Here's what the case is about, and here's all of our information. And it never fails that they throw in, this is what we think we're looking at here. And you've got to remember, I think the first thing you have to remember when you're walking in that door is that attorneys are advocates for their client. So you have two groups of people in front of you. You have the client, who is clearly an advocate for themselves. Then you've got the attorney, they are paid to be the advocate for the client. So you're walking into a room of people who already have a bias on which way they want you to go. Now, I'm fortunate enough to where I work with a lot of attorneys who are very good about not pushing that onto me. I can't really think of a time where I've had that, but it does exist. And I'll get to an example here in a minute. But what you have to do is you have to listen to what the attorney and the client are providing you in terms of information and the story that they're telling you. And, you have to ask questions. Again, they're going to tell you the information that they want you to hear. It's your job to dig out the information that might be under the surface that either they don't want you to hear, or they just have failed to mention, or 3, they don't know to mention it. So this is where experience comes into play, and we'll get into that category here in a minute. It allows you to ask the questions that aren't, or get the information through questions that isn't being shared with you yet. So once you realize that they're an advocate and they're on their side of the fence, and that it is your job to be in the middle, you can start to kind of work through the information that they've provided. So let me give you an example. There's a case that I am currently working on where they provided us a lot of information. And part of that information was a QuickBooks file. So I went through the QuickBooks file. And again, there was some information that their side had already put together. And so I had access to that. But like everything else I do, I go through and I verify. Even if I have a spreadsheet of here is how they did it from A to Z, I'm going to go through and verify, because again, it's my work product. I'm supposed to be coming up with the damages amount, so I need to do the legwork. So went through and found that a lot of the information that was on there it wasn't supportable. It couldn't be part of the damages amount. So call up the attorney. Here's what I found. I can't include these. Sorry, it's going to reduce the damages. But the value I bring to that case is there was a scenario that they didn't think of. There were pre-judgment interest amounts that didn't come into play yet. So I was able to calculate that, add it up to millions of dollars that you add on that they didn't previously consider. So yes, I lowered the value on the damages side, but I also increased it even more because prejudgment interest wasn't considered whatsoever. So as an expert, it is your job to not only go in and discover what it is that they've pointed out, but also look at the scenario and decide if there's additional items that they aren't thinking about. Because remember, you're the financial expert. That's why they hired you.